If your iPhone ever tells you that an unknown Apple AirTag is moving with you, don't ignore it. The 3 stories you're about to hear prove that one simple notification can change your life forever. This happened to me back in late November of 2024 when I was 18. I was at the Walden Galleria Mall in Buffalo, just doing some early Christmas shopping for my family. I like to get my Christmas shopping over with. I also like going to the mall during Christmas time because of the decorations and general vibe. Something about shopping when that Christmas feeling is in the air makes it more enjoyable to me. I had like 3 bags with me already. I stopped in Victoria's Secret, Zara, and Sephora. I got my brother and dad something from Zara, and my sister and mom stuff from Sephora. I also got myself a bunch of stuff. I'd already been in the mall for hours, and I wanted to just sit and collect myself. I sat on one of the benches not far from the tall tree that the mall puts up every year. There were still people in the mall, but it was closing soon, so there were less and less with each passing minute. A man came and sat down next to me. He cracked a joke at first, which I laughed at. He seemed like this innocent older guy, like 62 or something. He reminded me, honestly, of a skinny Santa Claus, ironically. We talked for a couple of minutes. The things he said that mainly stuck out to me were him talking about how he'd been coming to this mall since it opened, and how he was scared it was going to shut down. He said I looked like his daughter, and then showed me a picture of her on his phone. I didn't see a resemblance at all, to be honest. In fact, the girl looked absolutely nothing like me, or him for that matter. It was also a picture of a girl who looked like she was 18. He looked like he could have been her grandfather, honestly. Eventually, I felt it was time to leave, so I slightly awkwardly got up and said goodbye and walked away. I didn't look back to see if he was watching me. I like to avoid awkwardness in every way. I got to my car and started my drive home. I live only about 10 minutes from the mall. My family has several homes, and it's often that I'm alone with just my brother in this house. This was one of those spans of time. This night was a Thursday, I believe. My brother goes to University of Buffalo and often goes out Thursday nights. This night was no exception. Our house is in a cul-de-sac with 2 other big houses, and when I turned right into the cul-de-sac, I looped around to our house. This cul-de-sac is unusual. It isn't one big open court. It has a circular patch of grass with some trees in the middle, so it more so resembles a roundabout. Around this time, right before pulling into the driveway, I got a message on my phone. It said, "AirTag found moving with you." I panicked, but instead of pulling into the driveway, I looped around and drove back down the street, just in case I was being tracked. I had to make sure this AirTag was actually in or on my car. I figured out how to make the AirTag make a noise, and partially expecting it to come from the outside of the car, I heard a beeping sound coming from one of my shopping bags. I dug through the bag and pulled out an AirTag, actually feeling like throwing up. I put the car back in drive and drove further down the block where I chucked the AirTag out the window. Then I turned around and floored it back to the house. I drove into the driveway and ran inside where I opened the garage, hoping to hide the car in there, but my mom's car was in there. I had no choice but to leave the car outside. I closed the garage door and locked the front door. I called my brother Cody for safe measures, just letting him know what happened. He said if anyone comes to the house, call him. Him saying that alone scared me, especially hearing in his tone that he wasn't kidding, but he also sounded kinda drunk. I went to the living room and tried to just take my mind off of it, but I wouldn't have written this if that's where it ended. The sound of the doorbell made me sick immediately. It was like in the back of my mind I was dreading it, and it happened. Followed by the doorbell was 3 loud, distinct knocks. I slowly walked over to the door, like tiptoeing, and I stopped when a slightly muffled man's voice on the other side said, "Hey Ashley, I think you might have my AirTag." And it all hit me instantly. It was that man from the mall. He probably purposely threw his AirTag into my Sephora bag to stalk me home. He saw me through the textured glass. When I guess he saw me hurrying away, I heard him yell that he promises he dropped the AirTag in there by accident. I didn't listen to a word he said. Even if he was telling the truth, the AirTag wasn't in my house and he'd have seen that. It meant he saw me go to the house and that's all he wanted. I called Cody again, and at first he thought I was joking, but when he heard I was serious, he said he was on his way home. The downtown bars are not far away, so I'd only have to wait maybe 10 minutes. When I peeked back at the door, I could no longer see the man through the glass. Maybe he was gone, I thought. I went to the living room and turned on the TV to drown out the silence. I was trying not to think about the man at the door. I just waited for Cody, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I looked over, but now I didn't see anything. I sat there trying to convince myself there was nothing. Maybe the man left. Somehow, I did briefly convince myself of that, but after a minute or two of watching TV, I heard the same voice from outside that window say, "I love it when they play dumb." I looked, and he was standing right outside the window, his face pressed against the glass. He smiled when he saw me notice him. It was that old man from the mall. He lifted his hand and tapped on the window, then said, "Don't pretend you don't know I'm watching you." I called Cody and yelled into the phone that the man was at the window. He said he was almost home and told me to call 911, so I hung up and did just that. The man just kept standing there watching me, smiling like this was a game, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I left the living room to the office where there were no windows. A few minutes later, I heard Cody pull into the driveway. Cody ran inside, but when we looked back at the window, the man was gone. The cop who arrived searched but found no footprints or anything. The cop was not very familiar with the process for reporting an AirTag, but he gave me a police report number to use, and he suggested contacting Apple to start the process of tracking the owner. The next day, I tried that, but it turned out it would be a much more involved legal process than I was expecting. When I simply didn't hear or see anything else for a couple of weeks, I just lost interest. Maybe the man saw my brother and cops arrive, so he bailed and didn't come back. But to be honest, I have thought back on this, and on the girl's pictures on his phone. And I hope to God that wasn't another girl who he potentially kidnapped or worse. I truly hope that was just a random girl's picture he took off social media or something. At the time, I thought what happened to my family was just an isolated incident, but I couldn't have been more wrong. A few weeks later, I came across another story that began with the exact same AirTag alert, except this time, the tracker wasn't hidden on a shopping cart, it was hidden inside a car. This experience changed me for the worse. I'm not the same person I was before it all happened, and I fear I never will be again. My name is Claire. This didn't happen so long ago that I've forgotten about it, but it's not like it happened last week either. I no longer live where this story took place, so that's why I feel comfortable talking about it now. I had just moved to a new city for a promotion at work. It wasn't anything too exciting, just your standard mid-sized city. It was a Tuesday evening when the first strange thing happened. I was driving home from work, which, mind you, is just a short 15-minute commute, and I was listening to a podcast when my phone buzzed. It was a notification I had never seen before. AirTag found moving with you. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had dropped their keys in the parking lot, or maybe it was just one of my friends playing a prank. But as soon as I opened the notification, I was horrified. The app said the AirTag had been moving with me for over an hour. That meant it had been in my car the entire commute, or worse, in the parking lot before I even got in. I checked the back seat, under the seats, in the glove compartment, and even in the trunk, but there was nothing. No AirTag, and beyond that, there was nothing unfamiliar or out of place either. I instantly knew what was going on. Someone had placed an AirTag in my car, and whoever it was knew where I went. Worse, they knew where I was. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. Unable to find the AirTag, I had no choice but to drive home, meaning I'd be leading a potential stalker directly to my apartment, but I had no other option. Once I got home, I checked my car again, this time more thoroughly. I still couldn't find it though, despite my phone insisting it was there. The logical part of me wanted to call the police, but I hesitated. What could they do? There was no device to show them, and even if there was no direct evidence of who had placed it. I calmed myself down with some reassuring facts. My apartment had decent security, so it wasn't the end of the world if someone knew where I lived, and it wasn't like I could undrive home. Whoever the AirTag belonged to already knew my location, which no police or anyone else could change, so I tried to ignore it. The next morning, I drove to work as usual. The notification popped up again when I got to work. but I ignored it. Despite my efforts, I didn't get much done that day. I couldn't stop thinking about the stupid AirTag. When I got home that evening, I decided I had to find the thing. I spent probably an hour going through my car checking every possible hiding spot, even though I had already checked most of them the day before. Right when I was about to give up again, I ran my hand along the crack where the back seat meets the back and my fingers hit something solid. I already knew what it was. I took the thing inside, trying to ignore how violently my hands were shaking. I ended up just taking the battery out of it because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to destroy it because it could have been used as evidence, but I didn't like the thought of it still being active. The thought that someone had been watching my every move for days, maybe weeks, made me feel exposed in a way that I had never felt before. That night, while I was trying to sleep, I kept thinking about who could have planted that thing in the first place. There were a fair share of guys in my life, ex-boyfriends, friends of friends, flings, but no one who would have done something so messed up. The next evening, I came home late from work after a pretty awful day. I went to unlock my apartment door, something I had done 100 times, and I froze. My apartment door was already wide open. I live alone. No one, not my parents, not any of my friends, should have been inside. I didn't go inside. That would have been a terrible decision. Instead, I went straight back to my car and called the police. They checked the apartment thoroughly. There was no definitive evidence of anyone ever being there. No fingerprints, no forced entry, nothing to indicate someone had actually been inside. I ended up showing them the AirTag notifications and told them everything that had been happening the past few days. The police kept asking me if I had a history of being stalked or if I knew anyone who would do such a thing, but I didn't. The whole thing was such a nightmare. Things did die down slightly after that. My stalker had probably gotten wind of the police visit, but I ended up moving out anyway. Luckily, I don't think that person followed or tracked me to my new place, but it still gets at me that someone in my life stalked and broke into my apartment. The worst part though, the thing that makes this all so scary, is that I still have no idea how they broke into my apartment in the first place. The door wasn't damaged or broken into. It was simply unlocked with a key that no one else should have had.
But I never imagined an AirTag could be used this way. But the final story proved that the most dangerous person isn't always a stranger. Sometimes it's someone from your past.
This happened a few years ago, and I want to remain as anonymous as possible while telling this story for reasons you'll soon understand. I'm from an upper middle class suburb, but that's as much information as I'm comfortable giving. The nightmare I'm about to tell you about took place over several months and led to a slew of legal issues that, at times, made me genuinely question whether my life was going to be ruined. In other words, it wasn't just stressful and scary, but truly overwhelming on a level that's difficult to capture. I don't mean that as a joke or a figure of speech. There were days where I spent hours staring at the ceiling while considering some very dark things. This all started a couple weeks after I broke up with my first serious girlfriend after college. Let's just call her Devin. I'm not going to get into it. I refuse to do that to myself. But let's just say we did not end on good terms. Despite that, I wasn't too beat up about breaking things off. She was psychotic and I was kind of relieved to let it go. I have this friend named Zenon. Weird name, I know, but his parents have always been very wealthy, eccentric, and completely out of touch with reality. He throws parties pretty frequently at this huge property he inherited from them, which is something I still don't really understand since it's not like they passed away or anything. But that's his world, not mine. I was at one of these parties where I ran into one of my ex's friends, who I'll just call Taylor. Seeing her there wasn't the most surprising thing in the world. Most people in our area know Zenon, and basically everyone went to the same high schools and colleges around here. Plus, most of the people who left for college ended up coming back anyway. What was surprising was how aggressively and obviously she was coming on to me. Taylor had always talked shit about me to Devin while we were dating, so I found her behavior extremely strange. But my skepticism didn't last, and I ultimately gave in after a few more beers. And before you jump to call me stupid, if you knew what Taylor looked like, you wouldn't blame me. The two of us ended up hooking up in one of the upstairs bedrooms. I must have been significantly more dazed than she was, because I hadn't even started getting dressed before she was already halfway out the room. As I was leaving the room myself, I realized my wallet was no longer in my pants pocket. Taylor had disappeared at that point, probably to go flirt with some other guy in the crowd, but I tried to find her anyway. After maybe 20 minutes of searching, I gave up. I ran back upstairs to the room we'd been in and searched everywhere, but my wallet was nowhere to be found. My next instinct was to call her, but it took me all of 10 seconds to remember that I was still blocked from when Devin and I had broken up. And since there was no way I'd be unblocking Devin, you couldn't pay me to do that, I had no way of getting in contact with Taylor. Losing my wallet didn't bother me all that much though. It was probably just the alcohol, but I decided to ignore the problem for the rest of the night, enjoy the party, and honestly relish in the fact that I'd gotten one over on my ex by hooking up with her friend. I don't remember much after that. I'm pretty sure one of my buddies ended up driving me home. The second I woke up the next morning, I instantly remembered the AirTag I kept in my wallet for situations exactly like the one from the night before. I pulled up my iPhone and saw that it was active. It was Saturday, meaning I didn't have to work, so I decided to ignore my brutal hangover and track my wallet down. The location was showing up at one of the local gyms, so I figured I'd drive over there and confront Taylor for stealing it, or determine if she had taken it by accident, or hell, if someone else entirely had found it. As soon as I stepped out of my car and started walking toward the gym entrance, the AirTag went offline, which I found strange, borderline impossible timing. The receptionist at the front desk refused to let me look around without a membership, which frustrated me more than it should have. So instead, I walked the perimeter of the building like some kind of weirdo, looking through the glass to see if I could spot Taylor inside. But I didn't see her anywhere. In fact, I didn't see anyone I recognized at all. Not Devin, not any of my friends, not some random person from Zenon's party, no one. The AirTag was still offline, so I had no choice but to just go home and bury my frustrations in whatever work I needed to get done before Monday. All my cards were already canceled at that point, so I couldn't imagine what use someone would have for an empty wallet. I kept checking its location periodically throughout the rest of the day, but it didn't come back online. Not until the next day around noon, when I saw that it was once again online, this time at some random park nearby. So I again rushed to my car and drove out to its location, determined to get to the bottom of what was going on. But the exact same thing happened. As soon as I exited my car, the AirTag went offline. It was like someone was doing it deliberately to mess with me. There were a handful of people in the park, but again, no one I recognized. I was a bit more desperate this time around, so I actually started jogging around the park a little, but to no avail. As I was getting back to my car, I felt this sick feeling start bubbling up. Like I was being watched. Worse, like I was being observed. How could someone disable an AirTag the moment I showed up? They must have been watching me. It was a really uncomfortable thought, but there was nothing I could do about it. Looking back, that was the first time I suspected something sinister might have been going on. After I got home, I did some research and found out that whoever had my wallet was probably removing and replacing the AirTag battery to take it on and offline. It was infuriating to think that someone, probably Taylor, was toying with me like this. I had work the next day, so it wasn't like I could devote much energy to the situation. But for the next few days, the AirTag stayed offline. I decided to give up on the whole thing, refusing to give Taylor the satisfaction of watching me wander around like a lost puppy. But of course, the moment I started getting on with my life, everything hit the fan again. Only what happened next was about 1,000 times worse. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when the sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. It had been so long, literally years, since I had experienced true terror, but I can only describe it as suffocation. I physically couldn't breathe for about 15 seconds. It felt like someone was choking me. After finally snapping out of my haze, I called 911 and told them what was going on. Then I locked my bedroom door and listened as the person below me started tearing through the place. I wanted to go down there and confront them. I did, I swear. But I didn't have access to a weapon, and I wasn't about to lose my life over some personal belongings. So I waited. But from the sound of it, the intruder was gone long before the police arrived. And they were. The police took my statement, and I gave them a catalog of everything that was missing. My laptop, my monitor, some miscellaneous electronics, and a few other things. You might be wondering why I didn't connect the break-in to the AirTag situation, which is a fair point. And I did think about it, but I ultimately figured that would have been unnecessarily dramatic and paranoid. Fast forward a few weeks, I still checked the location of that AirTag from time to time, just out of curiosity, but every time I did, it was offline. That is, until one random time it wasn't. It was showing up at a decently popular bar that I'd been to a handful of times. Despite having promised myself that I wouldn't be suckered into someone else's game again, I couldn't resist. What happened when I got there really shouldn't surprise you. As soon as I was in spitting distance of the bar, this time with a hoodie on trying to be inconspicuous, the AirTag went offline. But this time, I couldn't just swallow my rage and frustration. I actually started going up to random people in the line and accusing them of having taken my wallet. It was bad. I was just approaching people at random, and even though I knew I was causing a scene, I couldn't stop. Everyone was staring at me, and that just made my outburst that much worse. It got so bad to the point where one of the bouncers had to come over and physically kick me off the premises. It was one of the most embarrassing and infuriating moments of my life. I got played just one more time after that, this time at a random coffee shop in the middle of the day, before I swore to never check the AirTag's location again, this time for real. But just over a week later, my life damn near ended. This is where excess detail becomes really risky, but please know that what I said earlier is 100% true. What happened next caused irreparable damage to my mental health and put me in a very dark place. I was getting ready for work one day when there was a knock at my door. It was the police, and they had an arrest warrant with my name on it for suspicion of stalking, along with a search warrant for my house. Specifically, they were looking for a journal that was supposedly hidden in one of my dresser drawers. I had no idea what was going on. I told them there was no journal in my room, but they weren't asking for my permission. That was what the warrant was for. Still, I insisted that there was no journal anywhere in my room, but they found one anyway. I didn't see them find it. I was already in the back of a police car in handcuffs by then. The next few months of my life were an absolute nightmare. Apparently, Devin had been crafting a case against me without my knowledge for over a month. She had produced what seemed like an overwhelming amount of evidence that I'd been stalking her during that entire period of time, even though in reality, I hadn't seen or communicated with her even once. There were pictures of me that she claimed to have taken at the gym, that one park, and the other locations. Locations that I'd been lured to by the AirTag. It was her the whole time. She had text messages that supposedly proved she was at those locations when those photos were taken, even though I knew for a fact that she hadn't been at any of them. But it gets worse. She had a series of text messages that had apparently been sent from my phone to hers over the course of several weeks. Really disturbing, harassing messages. Stuff an actual stalker would say, which is basically what I was at that point. In the messages, Devin would plead and beg quote-unquote me to stop contacting her, saying my actions were damaging her mental state. She's bipolar and takes medication for it, and she was saying that what I was doing was causing her to live in constant fear and anxiety. She even claimed that the stress from my harassment made her crash her car, among some other things I don't want to repeat. No one believed my story. I had no proof of anything, and she had it all. The journal was the most damning piece of evidence. It supposedly contained pages upon pages of me detailing Devin's daily schedule and having these psychotic conversations with myself about all the sick, nasty things I was going to do to her. Reading it made me feel sick, not just because it was so disturbing, but because I didn't write a single bit of it. No lawyer could help me. Her evidence was too overwhelming, and I couldn't prove any of it was fabricated. At one point, I was being advised to plead guilty. Guilty to a slew of crimes I didn't commit and would never think about committing. It was utterly disgusting. It made me feel like a disgusting human being. What ended up saving me was something completely out of my control. This guy Devin was sleeping with, I won't even bother naming him, called the police and confessed his role to the whole scheme. He told them that Devin had given him my AirTag, which she gotten from Taylor after Zenin's party. According to him, Devin had instructed him to lure me to different locations, remove the battery when he spotted me, and take inconspicuous pictures of me from a distance. He agreed to it because he thought it was some kind of funny joke at first, but text messages between him and Devin revealed that he started having second thoughts when she began talking about planting evidence in my house. The texts also showed exactly how she'd done that too. She apparently had made a copy of my house keys without my knowledge while we were still dating. Things went pretty quickly after that. Under pressure to now tell the truth, Devin ended up admitting to everything, including breaking into my house herself. She'd stolen my laptop because she knew my password, another thing I had no idea about, and she planned to use it to send those harassing messages to herself. Her logic was that she could later claim that I'd sent them from my phone and then deleted them, and that my laptop had been stolen so it couldn't be used as evidence against her story. She said breaking in and making it look like a random robbery was safer than constantly sneaking into my house over several weeks to send messages and delete them. Everything was eventually dismissed and justice was served, but I don't think I'll ever recover from what happened. I bet this story is already pretty long, but I could write pages and pages more about it. I haven't even given you the specifics of the aftermath, the way my family and friends alienated me, or even the painful process of keeping my name off the internet. I haven't given you my theories about why my ex would go to those lengths in the first place, or the kinds of stunts she used to pull while we were dating. I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable dating someone again. That's the worst part of it. The idea that someone could manipulate technology and the legal system to effectively destroy my life, and almost get away with it, is something that will forever terrify me. If that guy hadn't developed a conscience, my life might actually have been ruined.